2001, 2008, 2009, and 2025. The two things which are common in all these 4 years are one, there were terrorist attacks in India, and the second one, in all these years, the IMF provided bailout package to the country Pakistan. And that's a precise reason why in the recent meeting of IMF board of directors which was conducted, India not only abstained from the voting process, also raised a serious concerns over the efficiency of the programs being implemented by IMF to revive, to basically stabilize the economy of Pakistan. Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Before we declutter the recent announcement of IMF imposing 11 conditions on the next tranche, I have a very important announcement. Those who are preparing for the Civil Services Examination 2026, you need to follow Panchatantras. That is, cover the static portion effectively, update your current affairs, appear for prelims test series, mains test series, and to ensure you have sufficient material, you need a very good reading material. What if I say all of these are available when you purchase our courses, which is available at a discounted price of 60%? And if you use the code IS English, you will get an extension free of cost of another 12 months. Those who are interested, click on the link provided in the description below. Now, let me give you certain important basic points. Pakistan joined IMF in 1950, and the first loan was taken by Pakistan from IMF in the year 1958. And since then, there has been no stopping for Pakistan to approach IMF every now and seek bailouts, seek assistance under different programs of IMF. So far, it has taken 25 times the assistance in the form of the different tranches, in the form of different programs from the International Monetary Fund. However, in recent times, when the Pahalgam attack took place on 22nd April 2025, and on the 9th of May, IMF Board of Directors approved the next tranche of loans to the extent of around $2.4 billion to IMF. There was a huge opposition. There was criticism regarding the assistance announced by IMF. India, like I said, abstained from the voting process because there was no option of providing or putting a no vote. And following this, there seems to be a large pressure on IMF, and it now has announced 11 conditions. 11 conditions on Pakistan to achieve so that the next tranche of loan shall be issued or can be issued to Pakistan. So before discussing the tranche or the different conditions announced by IMF and the likely impact of it, understand certain basic points here. The IMF provides the bailout assistance, the bailout package to the member countries. And these bailout packages can be of very short duration, can be of a longer duration as well. And whenever the member countries are facing certain structural problems, they are facing certain structural issues such as lack of forex reserves, no trade or not sufficient trade with the global market, no sufficient industrial activity in the domestic market, no sufficient labor availability in the domestic market, etc. In such cases, whenever the problems are structural in nature, the IMF provides a loan or an assistance which will also be for a longer duration. And whenever these kind of assistances are provided, the IMF imposes conditions. It imposes certain conditions. For example, the last loan that India took from IMF was back in the year 1991. when India was facing a balance of payment crisis. There are multiple conditions which were imposed by IMF on the government of India's policies. And these conditions, there are two aspects to this. The IMF imposes conditions so that the situation in the economy improves, but at the same point of time, there is also criticism regarding the conditions imposed by IMF. The argument is when IMF imposes these kind of conditions, it will hurt the common man much more. It will hurt the Aam Aadmi to a very great extent. For example, in certain cases, because of the conditions, the governments have imposed taxes on consumption of goods and services. More taxes or surcharges have been imposed on consumption of electricity or petrol for that matter. In such cases, it is the Aam Aadmi or the common man which is hurt or who is hurt, and this person is already under a lot of pressure because the economy is facing certain issues. There is generally a larger unemployment. The wages or the incomes might be declining. The expenditure from the household would be much higher. So, in these instances, if you impose conditions, if you because of the IMF, if the government imposes more taxes, etc., it is going to hurt the common man much, much in a higher way. So these are certain important points that you need to understand in the context of IMF providing loans along with the condition. Now, what is the situation in Pakistan? The Pakistan's economy in the recent time, especially in the last couple of years, has gone through a lot of difficulties. For example, the foreign investments are very less, almost non existent in this particular economy. The inflation rate has been much higher. The prices of many of the commodities, the goods or services, have been at an elevated level. The economy doesn't have sufficient amount of forex reserves, etc. And that is the precise reason under the tranche of loans which were issued earlier by IMF, many conditions were imposed. And according to the staff level report, out of 28 conditions which were imposed by IMF for release of the next tranche, which has been approved very recently, in 21 of the parameters, Pakistan has performed to a certain extent. And that is the precise reason. One was the staff level report did not raise any red flags regarding the performance of the economy. And second reason which was cited by the IMF board of directors to allow or to approve the second or the next round, next tranche of the loan was that from the FATF grey list, from FATF grey list, Pakistan has been removed in 2022. So because there is no concern regarding the usage of the funds which has been, right, let's say, given in the staff level report, and because the country was removed from the FATF list, the board of directors approved the next round of tranche very recently in the May 2025. The government of India simply stated because there is no provision of voting against the loan or the tranche of the loan issued, government of India abstained from the meeting or abstained from the approval process, but gave a very strong reply, gave a very strong, right, let's say letter, strongly worded letter to IMF. It stated that the IMF historically has given loans to Pakistan. Pakistan on one side plays a victim card during the daytime and sponsors terrorism during night time. And many of these particular funds, there is no way to find out that it has not been used for terrorist sponsoring. For example, the government of India argues when the IMF provides a loans assistance to Pakistan like this, multiple times these particular funds would be used for, let's say, defense activities. And very recently, according to the staff level report also, it has mentioned that the amount of budgetary expenditure that was allocated for defense purposes is more than 2 trillion Pakistani rupees, more than 2 trillion rupees, which is in fact more than what was IMF estimating. And that's the reason the government of India simply abstained and stated that by providing assistance in multiple ways like this, 25 times since 1958, 4 times since 2019, we are creating a country which is too big to fail. And that's the reason the IMF should review the funding that they are providing to the country Pakistan. And it seems that this kind of the position that was taken by government of India and many other countries which criticized the IMF approving the loan to Pakistan has prompted certain changes now. And as a result of all of this, now IMF says for the next round of or the for the next tranche of loan to be released to Pakistan, it has to meet 11 conditions. Along with the existing conditions, if you take these 11 conditions, the total number of conditions on Pakistan by IMF now reach 50. And many experts argue it is not possible or it will be very difficult for Pakistan to ensure stability in the global stability in the domestic market, to keep the population pacified and also to meet these particular conditions. For example, according to the conditions which are announced by IMF now, the government of Pakistan now has to increase the debt servicing surcharge on electricity bills, which essentially means when the households will purchase electricity, consume electricity, they will pay certain charges. And on these charges, now surcharges will be imposed, which will be much higher compared to which is already being imposed. This is essentially going to increase the price of electricity which is consumed by households. And the logic behind this, some of you might be thinking, sir, what is the logic behind these kind of conditions? Like I said earlier, the IMF imposes such conditions in order to ensure there is stability in the domestic market. There is fiscal prudence in the policies of government of Pakistan. In fact, many of the policies that have been taken by the government earlier are not fiscally prudent. These are fiscally profligate. For example, very recently, the salaries of the members of parliament in Pakistan was increased. On one side, you approach IMF. You are saying we do not have sufficient money. Please provide us funding. And on the other side, you are increasing the defense budget. You are increasing the salaries which are paid to the members of parliament. Are these not fiscally profligate measures? So the argument that is imposed by IMF in the form of conditions is I will increase the amount of taxes collected by the governments through these conditions, and I will ensure the expenditure incurred by the government would be lesser, would be directed in certain way only to specific required areas. So, for example, Pakistan now has to increase the surcharge on electricity. It has to increase right the levy or a power levy which is imposed on certain production of electricity. It has to basically cut down. It has to cut down the amount of subsidies that it is providing under various industrial policies in order to ensure that the budget is fiscally prudent. The budget is not driven for some other objective rather than promoting stability in the market or the economy. The budget has to get the parliamentary approval. So many kinds of reforms have been announced or the conditions have been announced by the IMF, which now has to be met by the government of Pakistan if they want to get loans, if they want to get the next tranche of loans, which many experts argue will no doubt impose a larger penalty on the consumers, will impose a huge amount of expenditure burden on the Aam Aadmi or the common man of Pakistan. Is it the end of the story? No. What should be India's position now? What should be India's position? Yesterday, PCCI has announced that wherever cricketing events are held, which are led by, let's say, somebody representing Pakistan, or cricketing events which are organized by Pakistan Cricket Board, India will not be represented there. And that's the reason the Asia Cup, which was supposed to be held in this year, is already on the back burner. May or may not be held now. In essence, what I'm trying to say is India should not let off Pakistan very easily. It should keep on imposing more and more pressure on the Pakistani government. I'm reminded of a very recent report or very recent interview that I saw in a news channel. And that particular, the anchor that I'm talking about, the interview was of Yelda Hakim, a news broadcaster or a journalist. What Yelda Hakim recently stated was, no doubt, India has won the war with Pakistan. The recent conflict between both of these countries, India has won the war, but it has lost the global narrative. It has lost the global narrative. And those who are wondering, sir, why are you saying all of this? The reason she cited was whenever a foreign journalist wanted to talk about the conflict between India and Pakistan, there was no proper representation. Government official was not willing to talk to them when it is right putting forward the viewpoint of government of India. On the other side, if you wanted to talk to, let's say, an army personnel from Pakistan, if you wanted to talk to a minister from Pakistan, there were multiple representatives who are willing to come to the table, put forward the viewpoints of Pakistan. And that is the reason she says a lot of times what they said did not make any sense. But what they did effectively was create a narrative regarding the conflict between India and Pakistan by being present in the news. Whereas on the other hand, India was not represented efficiently. There was no sufficient representation. The government officials were not on the table to put forward effectively the viewpoint of India. Again, having said so, I do not completely agree with the viewpoint. There have been multiple instances where India has been effectively been represented by various representatives from the government of India. But at the same point of time, it is also true that we need to address this wrong or the fake narrative that has been created by Pakistan. How that can be done? One way is to put pressure on IMF, impose pressure on IMF. In what way? Whenever these particular conditions are imposed by IMF, the argument is if Pakistan will meet the conditions, we will give funding. Next round of loan shall be issued. But many of the times, the conditions do not represent the effectiveness of the condition. What do I mean by that? If there is a condition which will simply say Pakistan government will have to set up a committee to study the policy of government of Pakistan so that the policy are more prudent, more effective, not having a lot of wastage expenditure. So the government will simply set up a committee to meet a condition. But what did the committee do? What was the study conducted? Did the government accept the committee recommendation? Did the government change its policy, etc.? That is generally not focused whenever the conditions are imposed by IMF. I'll give you one more example. There is a condition where it simply says they will have to have sufficient amount of forex reserves. And when the evaluation is done by IMF staff, what if Pakistan simply borrows this money from its allies such as China, shows the money as a part of forex reserve, and meet the condition, get the next tranche of loan, which they generally do. So the argument here is government of India should pressurize IMF, create a narrative stating that we need to focus more on the transparency as to how these conditions are being met, how these conditions are being imposed, rather than simply having a checklist where the conditions are ticked off for the next tranche of loans. Another way that the government of India can put more pressure on the Pakistan's economy and overall the policies is there is a plenary session of FATF, Financial Action Task Force, which is going to be held the month of June, which is the second in this year. The government of India already has stated it is preparing all the documents which will be submitted to FATF as a proof of Pakistan's involvement in the recent terrorist attack in India. They should do that. Submit the correct documents, submit the proof of all of this, submit the proof that there are terrorist bases which are present in Pakistan, so that FATF again will include Pakistan in its grey list, which was done earlier but was taken out in 2020. And the impact of inclusion of Pakistan in the grey list is we can again target this and say, see, if IMF will continue to provide the funding, there is a danger that the funding shall be misused or directed for sponsoring terrorist activities, which has been accepted by FATF now. So the government of India should be using these tools which are at its dispense to ensure that the government of Pakistan is put under a lot of pressure and its practice of sponsoring terror will be eliminated altogether. So this is essentially the discussion regarding the recent announcement of IMF imposing 11 conditions on Pakistan to get the next tranche of loans. That's it from my side in this video. If you like this initiative, do not forget to hit the like button. If you are yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Jai Hind.